Kia ora koutou, my name is Mathew Pottinger and this is the South Island Meet the Candidates edition. So with me, we've got Joel Rowlands from Southland, just over there. We've got Dr. Ben Peters from Dunedin, over that side, and Ben Atkinson from Banks Peninsula, just down there somewhere. So today we're going to keep it quite focused on the South Island. I'm from Nelson myself, and we're going to be talking about the different issues that each of us have in our electorate. There's no sort of formal function to this evening, but we're just going to discuss amongst ourselves, and then at some point you're welcome to join us in the Zoom chat itself, and you can then, we're going to have some breakout rooms where people from different electorates get to talk with their potential candidate for the upcoming election. So, you know, without any further ado, let's do some more introductions. So, Joel, we've got you there down in Southland, which was where I was born, down in Gore. So, Joel, do you want to just sort of tell us a bit about yourself and then also what the sort of main issues are that you're facing in your electorate?
Okay. Kia ora, Joel Rowlands. It's nice to see you all. The real issue down here at the moment is obviously the tourism industry is pretty much screwed. So I think over the space of the last 3 or 4 months, we've gone from about 2.4% unemployment to around 25% unemployment, which is highest in the country. So yeah, basically the biggest issue that is facing part of the Southland electorate, because this is obviously the biggest electorate in the country, and Queenstown is not Southland and Southland is not Queenstown. So, you know, there's just one reason why Southland needs better representationship, because there's just so much diversity within the region. So, you know, there's farmers, and then there's tourism, and then there's, you know, people struggling to raise kids without, you know, UBI would be huge for example, me and with our first child, I was working 20 hours a week, she was working 20 hours a week, and then we'd take time off to look after the children. But we're basically just scraping by enough just to sort of pay our rent, pay our bills. If we both were rewarded with UBI to pay for that unpaid work, that would immediately take us above the, you know, the minimum wage, sort of, you know, just sort of scraping by, having some money that we could actually use to save or invest in our future. So yeah, for me, it's all about just small business and just keeping it moving down here. Yeah,
because I remember you telling me prior to COVID that housing was quite a big issue down in Queenstown. How's that sort of changed with, you know, with Airbnbs being not utilised anymore? Has that had an immediate effect on rents or anything like that?
Yeah, totally. So there's been a lot of people that have left town, and a lot of the landlords have decided to scrap the Airbnb idea, and they've sort of started to make 6-month to 12-month leases. Their rents have dropped down to, you know, it used to be sort of $850, $900 the norm. You can pick up a house around $540, $650 now. But also there's not the work to keep people here. So
I mean, that's really the thing. Like, even something as sort of huge as COVID doesn't even allow us to have affordable housing, because even at $550,000, that's still classed as severely unaffordable when you can compare it to your household incomes down there.
Yeah, so I'm just talking about weekly rent. I mean, I can't even fathom being able to even afford a house down here at the moment.
So let's move on for a moment to Dr. Ben Peters down in Dunedin. Do you want to start off telling us a bit about yourself and then segue into your electorate and what the issues are down there?
I will do. There are a number of segways around Dunedin, although I did hear that they are no longer being made by the Segway company. Although the Polytech did buy a couple to help people get around quicker. Anyway, it's a complete tangent, not a segue at all. I'm Dr. Ben Peters. I work at the university. My training is in biochemistry. previous to COVID, I didn't really expect that I would have much of a profile as a scientist. I mostly teach at university, so first year, second year, third year students, a little bit of med teaching in there as well. And then COVID happened, and suddenly I'm doing an awful lot of work trying to raise awareness around what actually it is and how we can respond to it, and kind of chipping in wherever I can to combat misinformation. In terms of Dunedin as an electorate, the student body in Dunedin is big enough that they could choose an MP if they all turned up to vote. They don't all turn up to vote is the problem. So we have about 20,000 students here every year, and David Clark wins with 20,000 votes. So it is entirely possible that the student body could choose who they want to be in power if they wanted to, and they could have amazing input then into Wellington. And so really one of the massive issues that we face down here is housing. Not a lot in the buying side, but on the renting side. Because we have such a huge body of students, we have an awful lot of houses up for rent, and most of them are atrocious. I've been in a fair few crummy flats that are pretty cold, are pretty miserable, and this far south it's rough. And a number of flat disputes around paying for heating. My wife was in a flat at one point, and one of the flatmates wanted a warm house, and so turned on the heat pump, and that was costing them hundreds of dollars a month, like $600 or $700. But then to keep it on, because everyone wanted it off, he actually took that heat pump remote to work, so no one could turn it off. So the house would be warm when he got back. So it's a wee bit of it's a very student town. Obviously, there's also a huge amount of workers and small businesses as well that are struggling a wee bit with COVID, but really if we can ensure the house prices don't rise too much, then we might be able to have students actually doing pretty well down here. If we have warm houses, then students will be able to actually study better, get better grades, focus more on what they need to be doing. And as an educator, that's really vital. I think that's a really high priority. When I was studying, the two things I always said was eat and sleep. It's more important than opening the book. Like obviously you need to do the revision as well, but unless you're fed and unless you're sleeping well, all of that book study goes out the door pretty quickly. So I think between that and the UBI, to really actually give students the ability to get through uni nourished, then I think they're the two big things really Dunedin needs to look at.
Because the UBI kind of acts like a universal student allowance, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know? Yeah. And I mean, currently, like, there's all sorts of crazy things with student allowances. You know, I've told this story a couple of times, but my wife and I received a letter from StudyLink saying your marriage is invalid for the purposes of StudyLink, which is just bizarre and a hangover from our previous generation, which got married specifically to avoid loopholes in StudyLink and getting money out of the government. So there's all sorts of weirdness around who qualifies, who doesn't. You know, a lot of kids who have wealthy parents who own a business the parents kind of artificially deflate their income so then their kids can actually get student allowance, whereas other kids miss out on it by the narrowest of margins. And so it's a really unfair system at the moment. It doesn't cover postgraduate study. And so, yeah, we really need to address that. And it also stops students actually working to get an income a lot of the time in their downtime. And that's really problematic as well.
All right, we'll move on to Ben Atkinson now in Banks Peninsula.
Hello,
Ben. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and then also, you know, what the issues are down in Christchurch?
Sure thing. So, kia ora, everybody. I was actually born and bred in Nelson, and I flew the coop after high school to come to Christchurch and study music at jazz school. I've pretty much spent most of my life working as a chef and a musician, but I've also, the last few years, got involved in a lot of social entrepreneurship and charitable work around child poverty. We fed 63,000 kids in Canterbury that were going to school without lunches. And I've done some work around men's mental health awareness. And I'm also currently working as a housing facilitator for a charitable trust where essentially I work with homeless people with mental health and addiction issues. So I'm doing a lot of advocacy with work and income, working with Kāinga Order, which is the new Housing New Zealand. I also have my roots kind of everywhere, places like Oranga Tamariki, Department of Corrections. So really getting to know how all these state services operate, which is super interesting. Down in my electorate, Banks Peninsula, heaps of issues, because it's probably like Joel's electorate in a way, where it's large enough to have so many different communities that have different issues. So, you know, we have like Sumner, which is very different to Littleton, and that's just over the hill. Then you got Diamond Harbour, Akaroa, quite little isolated settlements. I think some of the biggest things are, like, everyone, affordable housing, the isolation itself. So elderly people struggling to build community, have access to pharmaceuticals that they need, and getting in to see doctors and stuff when there's limited transport options for them in these isolated communities. Often that affects their mental health as well. And then I guess fresh water issues are really, really big down here. We're sending a lot of water away. We've got a lot of damaged wellheads, and obviously Lake Ellesmere is the most polluted lake in our country. And so there's a lot of pretty dire issues down here.
And so, just sort of touching on your work with the housing, you know, what did you make of well, I guess in many ways you've sort of seen the band-aids that, you know, the Labour and national governments have been putting on things for the last 30 years. And we saw that most recently, I know you came across it up in Auckland, where they were doing the emergency housing, but it ended up being just a complete mess.
Yeah, a lot of these housing band-aids and fixes, we need them to an extent, but a lot of them are just inflating the market. Like, so the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development releases their public quarterly report every 3 months. They released the last one about 2 weeks ago. And in the previous 3 months, we spent almost $1 billion on housing support. So $80 million of that alone was in emergency housing. So that's funding people into motels, or as we saw in Auckland, paying $3,000 for an uninhabitable house, which is just corruption at its worst. It's absolutely terrible. A lot of their money, I think around 451 million, was in accommodation supplements, which again is just, in a way, it's kind of supplementing landlords increasing rent payments. So as rent payments go up and up and up, the government has to revise how much we're giving people for accommodation supplement. For pretty much everywhere in my electorate, it's around $105 maximum, but in Auckland, it'll be around $150. And that money is going to the beneficiary, but then it's just passing straight across to the landlord. So almost $1 billion we spent in 3 months.
It's a lot of money.
That's big money.
And we're all agreeing here to say that, look, you need that. You need those Band-Aids, but you can't, the Band-Aid is not the only thing that you need to be doing. You need to be plugging it at the hole, at the source, you know, which is kind of what makes TOP a bit different, is that we're looking at the long-term systemic issues and actually addressing the root problems so that we don't, you know, so we're actually solving an issue rather than sort of sweeping it under the carpet, as we are.
So Matt, can I throw it to you then? What's the local issues in Nelson? I kind of love just that so far. Like, I used to live in Banks Peninsula, and Ben's the one there, but Ben used to live in Nelson, and Joel. I just like we all moved around a whole bunch, but we're all very, very South Island.
Yeah. So Nelson. So I've been here the last 8 years. Prior to that, spent a few holidays here, working holidays. So my background is, of course, engineering, and I run a small business here where we employ a couple of people and manufacture some product and ship it overseas. The big issues in Nelson are it's a really bad combination. We've got second to lowest productivity in the country, and that means that our average wages are about 15% lower than the average wages are around the rest of the country. But then we match that, unfortunately, with having some of the highest house prices in the country as well. So it ends up being that we're only second, so Nelson, Tasman, second and third only to Auckland in terms of having unaffordable rents and house prices here. So it's just, it's a really bad combination where we've got a lot of expensive houses, but we don't really have all the opportunities that you might expect to go with them. you know, in terms of having high paying jobs. So it's definitely a bit of a systemic issue around these parts, and hence why I'm involved too. Like, the other aspect was that not quite as bad as Queenstown, but since COVID, we had, I think, the second highest number of people in the country go on to JobSeeker for the first time, you know, and they, of course, probably quickly found out how sort of antiquated the welfare system is in this country, both with stand down periods, with the fact that, you know, maybe you got paid out a redundancy, but the way that our welfare system works is that you've sort of got to spend the money you've got before you know, they're going to be there to help you out. So, you know, the UBI would be a fantastic boost to the regional economies, all of our economies here, Dunedin, Christchurch, Southland, because, you know, for the likes of minimum wage workers, where we've got a lot of them in the region here, and a lot of flexible work as well. You know, we've got a lot of fruit picking jobs, and we have, you know, my stepdad is was involved with the employment side of that, and trying to find Kiwis to work and do these fruit picking jobs was just an impossibility. Now, when you look at what they're facing, you kind of understand where they're coming from. You know, they're working and they're earning $15, but they're losing $15 on their benefit. That welfare trap means that work just doesn't pay, and it kind of traps someone on the welfare, on the benefit, such that, you know, they want to get better off. They want to further themselves from a financial perspective, but our current welfare system doesn't do that. So yeah, that's Nelson in a bit of a nutshell. So if we've got a few more minutes left, we may as well just sort of talk about TOP's other priorities from a policy perspective. I know, Ben, you worked quite heavily on the innovation policy. Do you want to tell us just, you know, a few bullet points around that?
Yeah, I mean, especially given how much of a university and polytech town Dunedin is. So we've got both the Otago Polytechnic and the University of Otago here in my electorate, and both of those just generate a ton of students who want to go out and work and want to go do things. Unfortunately, we have a situation at the moment where a lot of students feel like they need to keep getting qualifications to try and set themselves apart from other people so they can actually get those jobs that they're going after. And I saw a news report just recently showing that there are a lot of qualifications being given that aren't increasing people's wages at all. And so you end up just putting people into debt, and they're not getting anything out of it. And this was predominantly Māori and Pacifica students that were being affected by that. And so what TOP wants to do in that sector is really help businesses partner with universities and polytechnics so that we can deliver the things that actually matter to people who are running the businesses, so our graduates get jobs that really do pay. And a lot of that is allowing for smaller, shorter courses, so you can actually be a bit more adaptive to the needs, and you can also really show that you've got the specific talents that are required for the job, rather than just the broad general, oh, you've got a degree in this area, and that can be a really, really broad degree taken with lots of different papers that make it up, but it all comes under the same title. And so really we're looking there to try and help people. Hey, cat. Help the education sector kind of tackle a wee bit of that inflation of qualifications and make them more adaptive. I think one of my favorite parts of the innovation policy is the government-backed innovation fund. So this is a place where people can invest their money. It's backed by the government, and it goes directly into New Zealand businesses, helping them grow, particularly not as startups, but post-startup is where it's really, really hard to get capital to grow into a medium-sized enterprise. And so we really want to help businesses do that, because there's tons of startups all over the place, but they really, really struggle to get beyond that. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Matthew, you're a bit more involved in the actual running of businesses there than I am, but it seems like we're really missing that funding gap. And I love the idea of being able to chip in as a Kiwi to help grow our own country, rather than just, you know, trying to scrape together every last penny to try and buy a house. That will just help exclude other people from houses. That really kind of annoys me, that it's so hard just to do something as straightforward as that. It's like, look, I've got extra capital, I want to make money on it, but instead of housing, I'll make money here, and that the money we're making should be equivalent. But at the moment, it's totally not, right? And that's the thing that's so busted. I was in a Grey Power meeting just yesterday, and the Labour representative down here, well, she was actually from Tyree. David Clark didn't show for, I don't know why. I won't speculate too much on why he's not showing up to things at the moment, although Parliament is in session. So, but anyway, she was really proud of the fact that she stopped foreign speculators, as if that did anything at all other than pump up our xenophobia. I was like, this is absurd. Like, we know it's not foreign speculators that are causing the issue with the housing crisis. It's regular speculators. It's all of us that just go, I need a house because it's the only way I can stay afloat. So yeah, I think the Innovation Fund does a lot towards giving Kiwis an alternative, obviously with the TOP's other policies helping out with the housing situation there.
Absolutely. You know, if we fix the incentives, if we deal with the supply side on the housing, and we deal with the demand, the distorted demand on the housing, you know, fix the tax system being one of those, then it will just be a far more rational option to invest in things like that investment fund and, you know, grow businesses, export product, make money, like real value, create real value rather than this whole bidding up the price of land.
Awesome. Yeah, I've just seen a question come in there as well from Facebook. What did you think of Google's proposed training system, 6-month certificate instead of a 4-year degree? How does it link with the innovation policy? Does it give more weight to it to the general public? And absolutely, this is what we're talking about having those flexible short courses, changing the idea that university is a place where everybody goes for 3 to 10 years, if you're me, just training, and actually going, what do you need to achieve to get to that goal? Look, there was a wonderful heyday when people could sit around and become educated people, where you could sit and just explore nature and the world and, you know, all that chemistry or biology or philosophy or the arts has to offer. That's not the world that millennials and younger are living in. We're going, how on earth do I just get a job that'll make enough that I might one day be able to buy a house? You know, and so really we need our universities to wake up to that reality. Yes, we want people to become and get educated, and there are pathways and jobs for those who choose to go down that. But we really need to make sure that we have the education system acting like that universal equalizer, where wherever you come from, you can go and get educated well and then go out wherever else you want to go. And the current 4-year degree system is not going to achieve that, or the 3-year degree, depending on what kind of degree you're going. So I think, yeah, absolutely we do. We want to see more of these short courses that are very specific to where people want to go, and want to make sure that those are worth the money that people are paying for them, because it's not cheap. And I think the more we try and make university cheap, the more we make perverse incentives there to go, when really I think we need to make sure that universities and polytechnics are high value rather than really cheap to go to. Yeah.
And also training people to be able to get jobs in their chosen study. I mean, how many people do I know around Queenstown that have university degrees but they're not working in that industry because they can't get a job? You know, that's a big issue for me, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, they're just desperately scrambling to find some transferable skills. What is one thing I learned from this that I can apply to get any kind of job?
Yeah.
It's hard.
And I mean, that's part of our system too, right? Where there was really one clear path where you'll get all the support you need from a financial perspective, a student loan, etc. And if you divert from that path, you're not going to get that support. So, you know, that's why it's not very, it doesn't really allow for the fact that, you know, a whole new industry might come up and that might not require a 4-year degree, but we're just kind of stuck in the system. Whereas, you know, obviously with the UBI, it doesn't care what you do. It just doesn't care. It's there to support you and to take any kind of training you want for any period of time. And,
absolutely. Yeah, and I'm saying, and especially like postgraduate stuff. I mean, like, I entirely chose to do honors instead of masters because I could get student allowance. Like, I just looked at it, I was like, one of these I get money, one of these I don't. I know what I'm going to do. Like, it's not, you know, if you're the kind of person that can think about doing an honors and masters, you're going to know which one of those is worth more, you know. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you put money there, people will go there. And I think we're too narrow-minded in what we think people should be doing. I know I've talked a lot to people at the Polytech, and they really struggle with getting high schools willing to let them recommend polytechnics to their students, because they're still stuck in this everybody goes to university mindset. And I think we really need to challenge that and go, actually, everybody should do what they find fulfilling. And I think this hierarchy idea that was kind of coming in, I think we need to try and squash a wee bit, because there are lots of things that are kind of feeling quite high up on the hierarchy of, oh, if you're X or Y, then you should come and do this or that. But actually, it's what are you passionate about? How can we support you follow your passions? And I think we've got so much further to go there in a universe basic income. Like I think of my wife's a theatre studies major. She's done a lot of acting, and all of her acting troupe would benefit immensely by having regular payments going, yep, you've always got your UBI. It helps you get up and going, because that's like the ultimate gig economy, is when you're literally doing gigs, music or otherwise. I mean, Ben, you're a muso, and Joel, I think you've been going into bands for a while. Like,
Same.
How
all of us.
Yeah, oh, Matthew as well. Yeah, I mean, the only band I was in was a brass band, so that's a little nerdier, but that's kind of my vibe. You know what I mean? How would UBI help you as musicians?
Man, it would have just been so huge. I remember when I first, I've always worked full time. So from the age of 15, I left school. I got a car painting apprenticeship. I was qualified by the age of 21. I was just listening to rock music all the time, and I was like, I want to do that. I got down to Queenstown and just threw myself into the music scene, but I still had to work full time. So I was working, and then I was work, and then organizing practices, and the hardest thing was trying to get people in the same room. But it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years where I actually, had enough experience, and I was good enough at what I was doing to be able to just go, right, I'm going to take the step now. So I ended up leaving the job that I was at and went full time for about 2.5 years. I remember the first payout that I got, I just went up to my landlord and said, here's 3 months rent. So there was 3 months rent just paid up. And then I was like, right, I had a calendar on the wall, and I was like, I need to fill this thing up with gigs. But there was times where I was making great money, but then there was times that I didn't have a gig for 2 or 3 weeks, and I had nothing. So I had to be really frugal and smart with the way that I spent my money. But a UBI would just take all of that stress off, and it's just there's a lot of young people in town that are sort of following the dream as well, and this would really, really, really help them. What do you think, Ben?
Man, well, a lot of creative endeavors just don't really pay. So myself, I play in an originals band, and we are a death metal band. So we don't really see a lot of money. And even to be relatively like successful worldwide in our genre still doesn't mean much money, if even enough to live on. It would still probably need a full-time job. So the thought of a UBI, not just for myself, but for anyone in that situation, kind of means that we're just actually giving appreciation to the art, because a lot of artists that I know especially aren't really particularly great at accessing Creative New Zealand or these different funding bodies. New Zealand On Air typically doesn't fund a lot of heavy music or experimental music. So, just having that payment coming in is going to just help you maybe take a little bit of time off work, or just to know that even if you're working really hard at this music thing, you're still going to get paid a little bit, even if it's not bringing in the cash, So like I could be in my band for 10 years and all the money just gets reinvested to get better and better to try and better position ourselves. But having a little bit of something in our pocket would definitely make all the touring costs and stuff like that a lot better.
And there was something that even existed before under the Helen Clark government. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I've got a lot of mates in sort of big bands, and they were all like, we were all on this like musician benefit, everybody got it, no questions asked. But as soon as National came in, they chopped it out. And look what happened to the scene. I mean, we had some of the best music in the world coming out of New Zealand for a long time. And then as soon as that sort of safety net got cut, because it is work, you know, and you're not getting paid for it. But
yeah. And if we can compare it to like, so both your descriptions there were gig economy, right? You know, and that there might be 2 shows one weekend and no shows the next. And we don't have, like, whether it's working for families, you know, that would be the sort of safety net we have here at the moment, because you're working, of course, and you're making money, but you don't know how much money you're making. And I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with working for families, but it's just layers and layers of bureaucracy, because you've got to tell them ahead of time for a whole year how much money you're going to make.
Yep.
And you don't want to get it wrong. Okay. If you tell them that if you got it wrong and you told them that you made that you're going to make a lot less than you did, then you've got a bill. You've got a bill that they're going to charge you interest on the year after. And if you attempt to keep them up to date as week by week, that's just a huge overhead where you're just going to overshoot and undershoot, and you're just going to have no hope in hell of ensuring that enough money's coming in.
Yeah. Or you have like a single good week or two or three good weeks, and then boom, you kicked off. You know, like I had a friend or a friend's mum who ran an Airbnb out in the Catlins. No, not an Airbnb at the time; it was just a batch, a bed and breakfast. Sorry. And yeah, she would at certain times, she'd have to like go, I'm just not taking people, because then I get kicked off and then I can't get back on for X amount of time. And so actually I just end up losing money by having business. And so it's just this huge, like you said, poverty trap. We just go, we're just going to make it real hard for anybody to do those little side gigs and do them legitimately. And that's what I think is rubbish. I think we have got one question here another question coming in. That I think we should address. That was, how do you think being a South Island candidate differs from being a North Island candidate, and why are there only 4 of you? So I guess that we'll tackle the 4 part. Is just South Island has a lot fewer electorates. I don't know if anyone's counted them recently, but there's not that many, and we have pretty good coverage given that. Like we're, there'd be 10 electorates down here.
Yeah, there's 5 in Christchurch, 6 if you count Selwyn.
Yeah, and then there's 2 down here, 1 further south. It depends if you're counting the one from like Oamaru up, and there's a couple on the west coast. So there's not that many electorates.
Yeah, that would make 7 in Canterbury, I think.
Right, a couple up north. So it must be maybe just under 20.
We probably should have looked it up beforehand, but
to be honest, I googled it, but it just Wikipedia just gave me a big list of the electoral system, and I was like, oh, that's not helping me. Come on, my on-the-fly fact checking not helping.
We don't forget about the other electorates too, right? I've got a roadshow event out in Golden Bay, so that's in Tasman West Coast. So there's 16. A lot of love.
Thank you, 16. My estimate was pretty good. A lot of us are doing double time as well. So like you said, you're going out to Golden Bay. I do Tari as well. So like the event that I was at just yesterday was hosted in Tari, which used to be South Dunedin, but now it's just has been renamed, along with Dunedin North being renamed to Dunedin. So a lot of these they do change. Yeah.
And as well, so on that question, how does it differ from being a North Island candidate? At least being involved with TOP, we may as well be anywhere, because we all sort of communicate via Zoom or Skype or anything.
So much more relaxed though, right? Like just chill.
Just generally.
There's a lot more driving for me. I'm in the country, so I've got a lot of ground to cover. So the difference between a Southland candidate and a Northland candidate for me is gas money. Is a huge thing, and just having to find time to cover such a massive amount of area, and there's so many diverse people and so many people with different issues. You've got the farmers, you've got tourism, you've got the students down in Invercargill, and the other weird thing is I'm sitting here in Central Otago in the Southland electorate. Central Otago is not even part of Southland, so you've got all these people down in Invercargill like, you're not from Southland, and I'm like, no, I'm still having this conversation. But this is why we need better representation.
Yeah. I mean, I've also, like, full admittance, I've lived in the North Island for a significant portion of my life. I spent about 7 years in Whanganui and another 3 in Auckland. So I don't get to count as like a true Southerner, although I was born in Dunedin and did stay for at least 6 weeks before leaving. So, I kind of scrape in as a Dunedinite. My grandparents are down here. My aunts are down here. We used to visit all the time in the school holidays, and now I've been here for about 10 years and raised my family here as well. So I think I still count pretty solidly as Dunedin, but there are a bit of differences between North and South Island. And I think especially like Auckland is very different as a vibe compared to down here. And like Dunedin is way different, where it's just, semester time, it's just students everywhere. And then they all go away over the summer, and you get this weird, eerie, quiet, but it's beautiful sun out, because when you're this low latitude wise, you get really, really long days in the summer, and it's beautiful. And there's no students around, so it's real calm, and it's just the most chilled out summertime. So yeah, each region definitely has some big ups and downs.
So, I mean, at that point, should we see whether or not there are any people in the holding pen, so to speak? So, as part of the Zoom chat, you can join in. If you follow the links, you can join in, and what we're going to do is split into separate rooms, and you'll get a chance to speak with the respective candidate from your electorate. So, Holly, is that? I don't know if she can.
Yep, give me 1 second. I'm going to start sorting that out. So if you want to kind of wrap up with a last question, I saw a couple more coming through.
When Top Muso Jam session.
Yeah, so
the Top Muso Jam session. Actually, we are preparing something, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're gonna do a little waiata, a little song. I've roped my wife in to help me because she sings way better than I do.
Yeah. Well, one final kind of serious one for the Southlanders. Could we get your thoughts on the wintering cow issue down here, Ben, as a side?
Yeah. So I went to that seminar, and I mean, Ben, this would be pretty relevant as well in terms of just water quality in general. Right. So there's water quality laws that are coming in place which affect wintering. There's been a couple shows going around where they present some pretty confronting images around the state of winter grazing in cattle, and it was because of that, I think, that last year when that kind of came to light, that really spurred on a lot of the action that's happening. Unfortunately, that does take time to take effect. And I was at the meeting. I listened to quite a range of people that were there as well, and a couple of farmers as well. And for a lot of the farmers, what they're seeing there really annoys them as well, because that's not good animal husbandry. And if your cows are in the mud that deep, so actually we'll step back a wee moment. What we're talking about here is in Southland and Otago, there's some practice in order to keep your cows fed over winter. You'll put them out and let them graze the paddocks, and over winter very little grows this far south in the middle of winter, so the grass doesn't really grow, but they go through and eat it anyway, and then that will effectively just leave bare paddocks, but the cows get fed. And so it's a balance there of how much they buy in feed versus let them feed on the remaining grass. And best practices, from what I understand, is trying to leave some grass on paddock to try and keep soil structure, not having high density of cows on there for periods of time, so you don't get huge amounts of pugging. That's where they're pretty heavy hooves just kind of punch the ground a lot. And then the confronting images that got shown were things of like the cows giving birth in these really muddy paddocks, and also having higher rates of lameness and things like that. So I think the vibe that I got from farmers there, and also it partly is hard because it's not really quantified. So where that was happening, there was no one in the room that was going, actually, this is all good. Like, let's just keep that going. The real issue was, how much is this bad actors in the community that we need to kind of call out? How much is it foreign-owned farm versus local-owned farm? Because a lot of the farmers that owned and operated their land for multiple years and multiple generations, well, they would never do that to our animals. And then, like, there is some tricky stuff around how the water regs actually work, and I'm not clued up enough to really do that. I know that when I mentioned that we should do some gene editing to help. I had a rather outraged Green person going, "Are you pro gene editing?" I was like, "Yep, yeah, I really am." I know it doesn't directly address the the winter grazing, but it absolutely addresses the things like how can we have fewer animals on the land and still get the same yields, and that is where the genetics really comes into play. And we've seen some great progress from various breeders around the country doing that. And we do have issues where a lot of farms were converted to dairy when they really shouldn't have been because of lucrative milk prices. And I'm not sure how much I'm going to get in trouble in terms of New Zealand's foreign policy, but certain international players plummeting the milk price to then make it unaffordable for farmers to continue in the hopes to then buy up their farms. I don't want to go too far into that because I don't have hard data, but there's some serious issues there where farmers actually don't have a choice in terms of they've got these huge debts that they need to keep paying and the milk price tanked. So something needs to be done. We really don't want that kind of animal welfare where the animals are pugging through really deep mud trying to give birth in muddy paddocks. That's really not good. But we also need to find a way to actually support those farmers out of that without them taking on even more debt, and then ending up and having just a lot of asset sales that would then get bought up by anyone with a big purse, which at the moment is certain overseas countries are doing that. Not that that's kind of want to split hairs between that and foreign speculation on property prices, which is a different thing, which I earlier talked about. But yeah, so there's a lot going on there, and it really takes some effort to kind of work through the weeds and figure out what legislation is good, but also what legislation will actually work, both for farmers and the environment. And so yeah, I think it's definitely something we can be very concerned about, and also try and think of a very good way forward.
Fantastic. All right. On that note.
Sorry, and before we break out for the rooms, Matthew, Ben, Joel, did you want to give voters a way to contact you after the live stream?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Facebook page for me, facebook.com/Matthew with 1T. Oh no, hang on. That's not right. Facebook.com/Matt, M-A-T. Pottinger, Pottinger. That's me.
I'm Ben Peters Top, I think so. Facebook.com/Ben Peters Top. And again, Facebook is great for me. I respond to messages pretty quickly on there. Email as well if you prefer to go slightly more old school. I think ben.peters@top.org.nz is currently working. So that's an option. I won't give out my cell phone number right here because I do want to sleep at some time. But yep, Facebook or Twitter if you want, at Ben A. Peters on Twitter. Fairly active on that as well.
For me, you can probably just find my details, or all of our details will be on our candidate pages on the top website.
Good call, Ben.
Throwing another name at you, you can probably just find it there, I think. I know my one has a link to my Facebook page and my email address. So yeah, go and check it out.
Yep, and for me, just the same as Ben, check out my candidate page. I think it's if you wanted a quick shortcut to it, it's at Joel Rowlands NZ, and that should bring it straight up. Otherwise, candidate.southland@top.org.nz. And I'm happy to listen to everybody.
Ditto.
So on behalf of the South Island candidates, it's been fantastic for you to have joined us. Like we said, if you've got any questions at all, just flick us a message and we'll respond. Bye for now.
Cool.
Akite.
Perfect.